urge to become productive on that day. So we start our day by doing our morning routine, either by making our bed, organize and classify our things.
When we do our tasks and homeworks, some people would have their to-do list in order to make the task easier to remember.
Before we go to the grocery store, we already list the things that we want to buy. Having a well-planned grocery list gets you in and out of the store quickly and won't bust your budget.
Classifying and organizing are already part of our everyday life, from making our bed, doing our tasks, to buying groceries. At the same level with this, in general biology, taxonomy has classified organisms into groups that have biological meaning. Because of the contributions of taxonomies, many of the organisms can be classified based on different characteristics.
The natural system of classification based on the evolutionary history and genealogy by a group of organisms is known as phylogeny. The phylogeny of organisms can be traced using the phylogenetic tree. Though they are similar to the family tree that is used to trace the lineage of a person to his or her set of ancestors. However, phylogenetic trees are not permanent classification maps because new discoveries and data organisms can change. Thus, current phylogenetic trees may be reversed as needed.
The best way that the scientists can draw a phylogenetic tree is using a cladistic. This is an analytical method of refining the evolutionary classification of organisms. Shared derived characteristics can be shown in a cladogram. A cladogram is a diagram that represents the evolutionary relationship among organisms. It simply reflects an important assumption that existing groups of organisms divide into kinds as a new kind of organism arises.
In dichotomous key, more pieces of information about the specific features of a particular organism are revealed with each sequential division. Furthermore, the organism is already identified when no longer shares its characteristic with any organisms.
A single species, example, a cat, can be called using the different names. Without a specific or unique name for that species, it is impossible to have a proper preference to that specific organism. So, by creating a system of naming organisms, confusion can be avoided.
Offer the first comprehensive, consistent, and much simpler method of naming an organism, species, which is now called binomial nomenclature. The binomial nomenclature is a two-word naming system used to name a species. In the naming system, each species is assigned a two-part scientific name, wherein the first letter of the first word is capitalized and the second word is lowercase.
Linnaeus systems of classification uses 7 taxa, which are arranged in logical order from the most general to the most specific. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. In interpreting the taxon hierarchy, the similarity among organisms is inversely proportional to the number of species. For example, if you go higher in the Linnaean hierarchy taxa, expect a decrease in similarities among organisms, but expect an increase in the number of organisms that belong to that taxon.
So, it is necessary to classify an organism is firstly because it allows us to understand their diversity much better. Secondly, is that it helps in the identification of living organisms as well as in understanding the diversity of living organisms. Thirdly, which is the last, is that classification helps us to learn about the different kinds of plants and animals, their features and similarities and difference.
That's all for general biology. Let's hop on to next.
Today, we're going to talk about our favorite subject, chemistry. As we all know, solutions are homogeneous mixtures of two or more than two components. By homogeneous mixture, we mean that its composition and properties are uniform throughout the mixture. Generally, solutions is made up of two components, solute and solvent. For example, when you dissolve a sugar and water, you get a sugar solution. In this example, sugar is solute and the water is solvent. Another example is when you make a cup of coffee. The coffee crystal is a solute and the water is a solvent. But today, we are not just going to talk about solutions. In fact, today we're going to talk about the dilution of solution. And an example of that are the tap of water and the detergent.
Dilution refers to the process of adding additional solvent to a solution to decrease its concentration. This process keeps the amount of solute constant but increases the total amount of solution, thereby decreasing its final concentration. Dilution can also be achieved by mixing a solution of higher concentration with an identical solution of lesser concentration. Diluting solution is a necessary process in the laboratory as stock solutions are often purchased and stored in very concentrated forms. For the solution to be usable in the lab, they must be accurately diluted to a known lesser concentration. We are often concerned with how much solute is dissolved in a given amount of solution. We will begin our discussion of solution concentration with two related and relative terms, which is the dilute and the concentrated. A solution which contains small amount of solute dissolved in the solvent is called dilute solution. For example, when you dissolve 1 tablespoon of sugar and large amount of water, you get a dilute solution. It is a dilute solution because the amount of sugar is small and the amount of water is large. Some examples are the vinegar that we use in our home. We know that vinegar is made up of acetic acid and water. Acetic acid is dangerous in itself. We cannot use it directly. So to reduce its effects, we dissolve small amount of acetic acid and large amount of water in order to make it a dilute solution.
Stock and standard solutions are solutions containing a precise mass of solute in a precise volume of solution. The key differences between the two are stock solution has a concentrated solution, whereas standard has a precisely known concentration. To prepare the solutions, a lab equipment called a volumetric flask is used. The solution used for this is M1V1 equals M2V2, where M1 is the concentration of the original solution, V1 is the volume of the original solution, M2 is the concentration of the diluted solution, and V2 is the final volume of the diluted solution.
And that is all in the general chemistry, especially in the topic of the dilution of solution. Let us hop on to the last subject, which is the general physics.
Hello everyone. So, for the physics field, we will show you some of the applications of Ohm's law in our daily lives. But first, what is Ohm's law?
Ohm's law is derived by the German physicist Mr. George Simon Ohm. It describes the relationship between the voltage, the current, and the resistance. Voltage is the electrical potential difference between 2 points, and it provides the push that allows electric charge to move around a conducting loop. Electrical current, on the other hand, is the rate of flow of electrical charge past a given point in a circuit. The resistance. It is a measure of the position to current flow in a circuit. Ohm's law has a lot of applications. May it be household appliances like heaters, even the rice cookers that we use, the mobile chargers that we use on our phones, or massive projects like rockets and spaceships. So one application of Ohm's law is presented in our intro, wherein the person changed the fan speed to another level. Here, the current flowing through the fan can be decreased or increased by pressing a button, because the buttons act as the way to adjust the resistance to the current flowing into the fan to change the fan speed. Another application of Ohm's law in our daily lives is shown with the electric kettle. Electric kettle has a lot of resistors in it. The resistors limit the amount of current to flow through them to only provide the required amount of heat.
Ohm's law is vitally important in describing electric circuits because it relates voltage and current with resistance to moderate the relationship between the two. Because of that, we can use Ohm's law to control the amount of current in a circuit, either by increasing the amount of resistance to reduce the current flow or remove them to increase the amount of current. Additionally, most of our appliances and gadgets that we use every day, like these things that you can see, follows Ohm's law for them to function properly.
And that is all for today. I hope you learned something on our presentation on how these three fields of science can be seen and applied on our daily lives. Thank you for watching.